Welcome to Scouting for Growth. On today's podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Sterling Parker, Senior Vice President of Global Solutions and Services at Ivanti. Sterling is recognized as a leader in workplace technology and digital transformation with deep expertise in helping organizations of all sizes, from global enterprises to fast-growing startups, navigate the evolving world of work. At Ivanti, Sterling leads global teams that empower businesses to create secure, flexible, and productive environments for their employees. He has been at the forefront of some of the most pressing issues facing today's workforce, including the return to the office dilemma, the growing demand for flexibility, and the rapid adoption of generative AI. Sterling played a key role in the latest Ivanti's report called Technology at Work, which reveals a striking insight. While 73% of office workers and 83% of IT professionals consider flexible working high value or essential, only 23% of employees say their current job is highly flexible. These highlight a major flexibility gap that organizations must address to attract and retain top talent. The study also explores the widening flexibility gap, the rising danger of shadow AI, and the critical balance between optimizing technology and empowering people. His hands-on experience, whether it is implementing AI to streamline workflows or advising on secure digital experiences, for instance, gives Sterling a unique perspective on how organizations can thrive in this new era. Sterling, thank you for joining me today. I am excited to dive into the findings of the report and hear your insight on how leaders can build workplaces that are not only more efficient, but also more human, flexible, and future ready. Hi, Sterling. So good to have you on the Scouting for Growth podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Sabine. Great to be here. Happy to be having a chat with you today.
Oh, so excited. I've been working and engaging with the Ivanti team now probably for 3 years, darling. And I had the pleasure to do a webinar with you on LinkedIn. And I hope people will go and find that webinar that we did a few weeks ago. But tell us, Sterling, how long have you been at Ivanti and how long have you been leading global solution and services at Ivanti?
Boy, it's been quite the ride. I've been with Ivanti now for 14 years, just barely past the 14-year mark. It's gone extremely fast. Maybe to back up a little bit, prior to joining Ivanti, I was a contractor for the defense department here in the US, and I was leading a team of systems administrators, and it was a contract project. That contract ended. And at the time, my boss at the time ended up moving to a company called Landesk, which is now Ivanti. And he had convinced me to, hey, come over to Landesk. There's a lot of really good opportunity, right? We're growing. There's a lot in front of us, and we've got some really neat products that we're working with. And for me, it was a tough choice because I'm leading a team, and now I'm going to be applying for a job as a frontline support engineer. And so I had to make that choice, right? Of like, hey, do I want to continue down the leadership chain, or do I want to go and jump back into the frontline technical work? And I interviewed at the company and really liked what I saw and decided to join. So I started as a frontline support engineer, and I was supporting our management suite product for Landesk, which today it's our endpoint management solution, our Neurons for UEM solution, and have I did that for a few years on the technical side, and then leadership attracted me again, and I started to lead teams, and it led to some really unique opportunities. One of those was, I was asked by our VP at the time to, if I would be willing to move abroad and to help open some support and some operation offices outside of the U.S. and had the chance to move my family to Poland.
Oh,
And
nice.
we lived there for 5 years, and I helped stand the office up. We did a lot of excellent work there in building the support teams. We also built out some dev teams and helped get the business up on its legs. And then COVID hit, and that forced us into a decision of, hey, we don't know what's going to be happening with COVID, and everybody in Ivanti, at least at that time, like most of the world, pivoted to remote work. A lot just unsuredness, right? In terms of what are we up against? What is this going to bring for us? So we were met with a chance to return to the United States. So we repatriated and came back to the US. And I'm now leading our global solutions and services teams globally. And we're a team of about 475 people across the world. And it's an amazing opportunity, and it's very humbling too to be able to lead that big of a team, but to also be able to see what we're capable of at the end of the day, and how we're now navigating what is hybrid work, what is fully remote work still for some, and what is some of the the challenges we have in being able to accomplish our day-to-day job while balancing the demands of both work and life outside of work. But I've been leading the services team now. That's been now part of my purview since January of this year. So, I've still got a little bit of fresh legs on the services world, but it's I've got some really strong leaders that are helping me through that journey, and it's really exciting times right now for us.
Yeah, congratulations. And, I've been lucky to engage with your team now for, 3 to 4 years. And when I met the team, I remember thinking this is one of the best kept secrets in the tech industry. When you think about Ivanti, it was already a $1 billion revenue company at the time when I met you guys. And I thought, you know what? It's so exciting to actually engage and learn about an organization which care for people, but also which actually has technology that a lot of people probably didn't know 4 years ago. I know a lot of people
Yeah.
know a lot of about Ivanti scenes, but 4 years ago, I thought this is a fascinating opportunity. So let's dive into some of the research we have been actually engaging with over the past few months, actually, Sterling, which is about tech at work. And one of the big themes that came about with the recent Ivanti report was a flexibility gap and the need for employee autonomy. One of the key term that was used in the report, which actually got me to think a lot about, is the flexibility gap. The fact that there is a significant flexibility gap with 73% of office workers and 83% of IT professionals considering flexibility essential or high value, yet only 23% of employees report their current job is highly flexible. So for you, Sterling, what are the main drivers, right? What are the main reasons behind this gap? And how can organization begin to close it effectively?
Yeah, great question. The number of individuals, you mentioned 23% report that their job is not highly flexible. That should be alarming to a lot of leaders, right? Especially if you're leading a team where you need to prioritize flexibility. Essentially, what that first tells me is one, you need to hear the feedback from your team in terms of what's preventing them, and whether it's perception or reality, from having that flexibility in their current day-to-day job. And if you're trying to address something without hearing first from what your team demands in terms of that flexibility, then you as a leader are going to have a hard time marrying the demand to the business objectives.
Yeah.
And that is a delicate balance. And I think once you you've come to ground on what is the real demand from the team, what is the real ask, how are they looking at flexibility in their day-to-day job, then that's where you as a business need to first look at where do I need to invest. Because step one for me is it's a lack of investment from the business that's leading to this 23% feeling like I don't have any flexibility. Uh, and then once you've started to invest in that flexibility and addressing, you need to make sure that those roles and the responsibilities and that the outcomes for those individuals are very clearly defined. Because if you're not defining what success looks like
Yeah.
for an individual, then how are you going to be able to measure as you pivot to more flexible work whether or not that is really leading to the outcomes that you need as a business to continue to invest into that flexibility, right? We definitely see that businesses, when they are maybe feeling like they're too flexible,
Yeah.
they tend to over rotate and say, well, we're going back to the old standard of return to office, and because we can control more because we're in the office, and we just get a little bit more feel good moment because we can see the work being done. So when things are clearly defined, you tend to have more flexibility at the leadership level and at the individual level. So then you're both working together to say, hey, here are the outcomes that I expect from you as an individual or as a team. And here's what we're going to be measuring those success stories against, and we're going to be now in lockstep on making sure at the end of the day we're doing our jobs right. And
Yeah.
then that behind it brings in that ability to be more flexible. But it absolutely is essential, and I don't see that flexible work is ever going to go away in the current and future market conditions, right?
No, it won't change. And I think what is critical is a point you just made, which is about focusing on outcomes. I think what we are seeing is businesses have to adapt to the fact that we need to be more flexible. People are asking for the balance between hybrid and remote working. Partly, when you have chores and family and you don't want to spend 2 hours in the car when actually going into the office, if you are driving to the office or public transport as well. I have a lot of my friends having to commute or used to have to commute 2 hours or 3 hours per day to get to their office. I mean, that is going to the gym, taking care of the family, maybe cooking rather than buying pre-packaged food as example. So I think that focus as well on outcome alignment with that, I mean, alignment of outcome with delivery rather than focusing on input output is going to be actually very relevant. And so if businesses are not used to focusing on outcomes, what needs to be delivered for a customer and actually trying to manage tasks, that's I think where you start seeing probably a major problem with this alignment.
Yeah, agreed. And you see, I think about when we were in office more full time, and there were some really excellent taskmasters, right, in the office, and they were ensuring that tasks were getting accomplished in the day-to-day work. And you talked about, ensuring now how do you one task mastering what needs to be accomplished side of office to promote that flexible work, while also keeping in mind what are the true costs of being flexible and the true costs of being less flexible, right? You just highlighted it. It's if I'm less flexible with my employee base, there are costs that they are now assuming around, hey, if I'm in a big high rise in the center of the city, my lunch is going to be now made for me from a place that I'm going to go to, and it's going to cost me, $30 to have lunch that day versus at home, I'm going to be able to whip something up for less than $3. That's kind of what my average pay, when I make a
But
meal, I
it's
try to
true.
keep it.
Yeah.
It's true. It's absolutely true. And then you look at there's real costs in time spent with family. There's real cost in that commute, right? And the commuting of it is expensive, and people when they are looking to grow with a business and be with a business, they weigh those options in front of them, and they take that cost internally to themselves and say, is this what I'm working towards? Let's say if I'm in a full return to office mandate, is that something that is going to, one, what is it going to cost me, but two, what is my return on that cost as well? So I think that's where the flexibility of it really brings in uh, really adaptive leadership model that lets you, one, be considerate of what people are weighing, but two, helps you if you're pivoting to flexible work and you've got that as one of your attractors to your business. It helps you attract some high level talent because you're promoting that flexibility within your business, right?
Yeah, you really touch upon that, autonomy to handle personal matters. So that is very important for people. So you're already highlighting it. Leadership need to change. So how should leaders redefine workplace flexibility to meet these evolving needs?
Yeah, that's it. When I look at redefining flexibility, it comes down to understanding what are the mutual benefits involved in that definition of flexibility for individuals. And it from what I've seen, it happens at a team level that, certain teams need to be defining what flexible means for their teams, especially when you are working in different objectives, right? So flexibility for, let's say, if I'm a haircutting salon, I need to define flexibility differently, right? Because there have to be heads in the store for me to do my job. If I'm cutting hair, then my flexibility perhaps is having a team that I can actually scale with. If I've got something last minute that I've got to go and address family wise, then I can quickly step out while I get cover from my team, right? My team helps define my flexibility. If I am an individual contributor and I am maybe a software developer,
Mhm.
then I've got the ability to be more flexible, but that defining that flexibility needs to be in lock with what your leader and your leadership is expecting for your respective outcomes. And then that's how you start to define what does flexibility mean for you. For my teams, the way that I've defined flexibility is, hey, if you are around a center of gravity, if you've got an office that you can go to, then I want and I encourage to have what I call anchor days in office. There is arguably uh, benefits of seeing people and being with people in person that you just cannot mimic in the remote world. And those sidebar conversations, the quick true ups on maybe something that's been escalated, the quick alignment that you get in passing with an individual, but also being able to build that relationship in person, it accelerates when you're in office. So I call those anchor days. But then defining beyond an anchor day is I also see that when you are in office, sometimes those sidebar conversations can be a distraction to your day-to-day job. Sometimes it can hinder you from really getting down and getting stuff accomplished that you have to get accomplished. So there's the relational, and then there's the tactical, and there's the strategic. So as you're framing that flexibility, you've got to make sure that it complements what you need from the strategic side of the team and the individual, what you want tactically done. And does my flexibility framework allow for that role to accomplish what I've defined as their success criteria? And so that's how your framework kind of builds backwards beyond what are the deliverables? How do I accomplish this in mind and in mindfulness of what the individual needs and what they see as beneficial in their day-to-day work-life balance?
Yeah, fascinating. So one thing which is happening as well in the workplace is we have five generation now in the workplace, right? And
Yeah.
so one key stat which comes to mind is 53% of millennials are willing to quit their jobs today for more flexibility. What do you think are the potential risks for an organization relying on that segment of the population for failing to adapt? And what practical step would you recommend that they actually apply to retain that talent? We have a major problem in finance and insurance where talent do not want to come to our industry. So we have a talent gap. And at the same time, I read those stats. So what can we do, Sterling?
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who is borderline millennial, I'm technically Gen X, but borderline millennial, I feel like I've got a little bit of that millennial blood in me as well, and so I empathize with I empathize with the risks that are real, and that risk really, and it it goes beyond millennial, but it is there's going to be a higher turnover because there is a shift, and it's already shifted, more accelerated since COVID, but that individuals are willing to leave businesses for flexibility, right? And when businesses refuse to adapt, then you're going to increase that likelihood of losing those really skilled employees,
Mhm.
which at the end of the day comes at a true cost of the business, right? And it's highly disruptive in the business as if they fail to adapt, to help enforce now finding new talent that's going to be agreed to work in a less flexible environment. So you're going to experience also that talent shortage, right? That rigid workplace. It's gonna struggle to attract that top talent, and job seekers are actively considering what the flexibility framework is in every interview, right? And they look at it as a bi-directional interview of, hey, I need to understand what is that flexibility model for me. It can also have lower engagement and productivity from those employees who decide if there is a shift to be less flexible from the business, and then it is a demanded return to office, for example. Then you're going to have employees who do what's called kind of the silent quitting, or they're just going to have that lower engagement, that lower productivity. And that's going to have a real impact on reputation for the brand. And you're going to have that employer brand take a loss. You're also going to have what I see as a risk is lack of diversity and inclusion within that flexible workplace, right? Where you're wanting to promote and accommodate that diverse life circumstance. You've got parents, caregivers, people with disabilities, et cetera. So you're going to also have that as a risk as well. And the ability to innovate. You see that as also a potential risk, that when you have top talent leaving or top talent not being attracted to the business, then you're going to have an innovation stagnation because your top talent isn't staying with you and growing with you. So I think those are some of the real risks, and businesses need to be mindful of that. And if you don't have a strong uh, framework around flexibility that you can really go out and evangelize as a business, then that needs to be a priority, especially if you want to improve and attract some of these higher level talent individuals that you want on your team, and you want them delivering for you at the end of the day, and you don't want them just to come in and do the 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
You want them to come in and back your business, your strategy, your vision. You want them to feel like an extension of that business, and that it is core to who they are. And that's what I see is the flexibility really allows that to happen with top talent, like millennial talent, that are prioritizing that flexibility within their work environment.
Yeah, and the key terms here is the extension, right? Having the team by aligning with their view as to how work should be done in the 21st century, post COVID in some ways. It's actually finding the right way to connect those people to the strategy. I think there are three statistics I would like to highlight from just the conversation we just had around what do employees really want in terms of flexibility, Sterling, is flexibility includes not just remote work, but also hybrid models, flexible hours, compressed work week, and the ability to tailor schedules. So not everybody wants the same flexibility. Some want hybrid, some want remote, some want flexible hour, and they want that transparency and the trust from their employer. 80% of employees globally would be more loyal to an employer offering flexible option. 80%. So again, that trust and transparency is so critical. I remember some of the clients I'm working with in my industry, you know, immediately when COVID happened, some already had 30 to 40% of people working remotely. They moved to 40 to 50%. And they said, Sabine, we can because we already had a scenario plan for this already. And I was so impressed, right? Because we often think that insurance is rigid, but actually a lot of the insurer already have thought about that model. Third statistic I thought is interesting is companies offering flexibility see a 25% increase in retention and 45% higher engagement. So those numbers are not small, right, Sterling? They are
Right.
quite significant.
Yeah, they are very significant. And the the flexibility that helps improve the overall delivery that those teams are able to provide is what is forcing the industries that were potentially more rigid historically, right? To really come back to the table to say, hey, how rigid do we really need to be as a business in order to accomplish what are the objectives in front of us? And it is now forcing leaders to distill, what does rigidity mean within my environment? What are the things that I cannot negotiate on, the non-negotiables that I absolutely can't be flexible on, versus what are some things that I can actually take a second glance at, a second look at, and really critically think about what's going to allow me as a business and in this business sector even redefine what flexibility is and to lead the pack in that industry, right? We had, I won't say who the bank was, but there was a bank who went up and the CFO went up at one of the company kickoffs and said, it's time to return to office. I don't care. I don't I don't see this any other way. And we are a banking industry. The banking industry requires us to be in person. Boom, full stop, right? And that rigidity, that rigid approach led to a lot of internal attrition, a lot of folks saying, well, that this isn't for me. And maybe that was part of the intention too. I know there's some who would argue that return to office is a way to increase attrition in order to prevent maybe a layoff cycle or something like that. I don't want to get too far into that,
Natural
but
attrition, interesting.
natural attrition, right? To help meet some financial objectives. But that that approach is what I think is going to hinder some companies from being able to take it to that next level. So, the simplest form is identifying how rigid do you need to be as a business, and what can you prevent or what can you introduce, even if it's at a tech stack level, uh, that would help give you some opportunity to be less rigid and more flexible.
Yeah. I mean, we are diving already into the return to the office or RTO dilemma and how we balance this with employee well-being. And the reports highlight that 48% of employees and 64% of IT professionals feel pressure to return to the office. And your example is a demonstration of this. I think when you start looking at legal industry, banking industry, and I think I'm very clear on when I think about banking, I'm thinking about M&A. When I think about legal, right, you have always industry with highly data sensitive environment, which are, stock market sensitive. And so maybe, having that balance around having the meeting and the client meeting into the office or in a secure environment is important. Despite that, 82% report that they are at least as productive working remotely, right? They can work anywhere they want. So how should organization balance leadership's style, leadership desire, and in-person work with employee preferences, partly when we have proven data demonstrating that productivity is actually very high and probably similar working remotely.
Yeah, I like that part of the sentence that you said, at least as productive, right? So 82% report they're at least as productive remotely as they are in office. I gotta get a little bit of a chuckle of that. It's like, well, I'm as good at home as I am in the office. And there's certainly others too that feel like I am better remote, right? Whether that's working from home, whether that's working from a road trip, right? That you're taking on the road and you're working from an RV or whatever you're defining as your flexible work journey, right? But getting back to the crux of the question here around how do you prove what productivity is for those individuals, so you dispel some of the assumptions that come with flexible work. And in my position, I have had to critically think through this, right? When I hear the sentiment of, hey, I'm just as productive at home as I am in the office, I get it. I understand it. I empathize with it, but I need to see the data as well
Mhm.
to help back up where I'm going to position and put a force behind for my team. So one, I've got to evaluate and share that data, and I've got to be transparent with it. I can't hold it, just
Mhm.
to myself and to my respective directs. So once I collect that data and what I've defined as my productivity data, then I need to be showing that proactively with my team, both for the in-person flexible work arrangements, and then sharing those findings openly with other leaders. So we really focus as an ELT team at Ivanti of not just making your respective organizations better, but making your peers better. And what are you finding within the breakdown of your organization that's working and not working? What are the headwinds and tailwinds in terms of flexible work, and building a culture of flexible work that complements and allows people to attach themselves to the vision of the company? And what are things that are working well so that other organizations within ELT benefit from the work you've done and vice versa, right? So that data is incredibly important. You've got to define also what are the in-person activities when you are in person, that are critical for your business, right? So if you're requiring somebody to be in person attendance for those activities, you're setting a preemptive expectation with these individuals about what do we expect when you're in office this week, right? Had my senior leaders that flew into Utah. We'd like to do it more often, but it's a pretty infrequent thing. And the expectations ahead, the agenda building, the what are we going to be doing? It was done months in advance of the on-site, right? And you have to, as a leader, treat that with just the same amount of importance, especially if you're doing what I called earlier as an anchor day in the office. Well, what are the expectations of that anchor day? Right? What are you going to be doing that day? Is it team building? Is it onboarding? Are you brainstorming? Are we prioritizing face to face? We have face to face skip level meetings, right? Those are calendarized. We expect it. It's structured in a way that's predictable. You also need to make sure that those employees are involved in that policy development, so they don't feel like you're just coming down with the policy that you've baked at only the leadership level. It has to be a mutually agreed policy, so employees are backing and they feel like they've got an investment too in what's bringing in that flexible policy. You also have to, as you mentioned earlier, around the difference between the flexible and the hybrid models, making sure that those are offered,
Yeah.
and that it's in a combination of remote and in-person work so that you're supporting
Mhm.
that leadership's needs. And I look at this too when, as a leader, if you're going to be introducing a hybrid model,
Mhm.
um, and a flexible model, what do you do with somebody who's new to the organization, right? What do you do when somebody's newly getting onboarded and you've got this RTO dilemma, that you're working up against? Well, sometimes your RTO mandate may be your onboarding phase. You're going to be RTO'd for the onboarding because I need you in person. I need you working and collaborating with not just your team, but with the other co-located groups. I have support and services. I absolutely love when my support and services are co-located with developers, with product managers. So when you can find a synergy moment to have somebody who's brand new to the business or somebody who's maybe learning a new product or a new skill set, I want to make sure RTO, that policy is built and tuned specific to that need. So I think there's a couple of layers to that. And probably the most important, and the last one that I'll speak to here, is that as a leader, you have to lead by example. When I was considering, for example, here in Utah at the beginning of the year, I saw that our development teams and our product management teams were going into office a couple of days a week. They were breaking bread. We were bringing in meals for those teams. I brought it up to my team of like, hey, let's do it, right? Let's combine that. And if you're located close to the office here, let's go into the office and pivot from fully remote to this hybrid approach because we've got an office that's not getting used. Let's use it. in the very first couple of weeks, it was tough on all of us. It was tough on me, right? It was an adjustment of, hey, now I'm commuting. Now I'm trying to incentivize others to commute with me, but it really is leading from that example, and leading from the front and helping build that trust to help provide that value for those individuals that are also seeing it as a challenge or a tough thing. But net is that it proves behind the example building, people start to see the benefit of it. They start to see the value of it. And if they're not seeing the value of it, it goes back to that feedback loop. What can we change, right? What do we need to do differently then so that you do see the value in it?
And I guess, I mean, the key benefit of RTO, I think, is I hear it often, it's about building culture. At the end of the day, it's very difficult to build culture remotely, and also alignment. It's also very difficult to actually make sure everybody understands the same thing in the same way. If you cannot whiteboard, let's say, just for a day and getting everybody aligned. So there is a benefit there as well. But what you also said around being clear as to why people are coming to the office, rather than just maybe having the coffee chat, which are important, right? But how many coffee chat do you need per week? Probably a few, but not the whole week. So being clear around the agenda as to why we need to be there, if we already know what our workload is going to look like, is going to be very important. And I think it is important because the report also discussed negative workplace behavior. And there are two terms, I think, which were highlighted in that report, which is presenteeism. 39% will just go to be there, and resenteeism, which is I'm going because I don't have a choice, right? I'm just showing up. So, and there's resentment in doing so. So, what are the hidden costs, actually, Sterling, of this behavior for the business, and how can companies mitigate this type of risk?
Yeah. Those those hidden costs, especially if you're focused on presenteeism and being present rather than the outcomes, then you're going to get a hit at productivity,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to see immediately disengagement where somebody's only present in body and maybe not in mind, and they are producing less and they're diminished overall in that team output, especially if it's a collective sense of I'm here to show my face. I walked into the office today. I did my job, right? The other thing is that you're going to see that productivity then impact quality. And what is that quality? What are your expectations of quality, and how are you tracking that so that if you see a real early indicator that quality is getting negatively impacted, then you need to look very critically at the return to office mandate and understand what could be leading to that. You also see, increased errors, decreased morale, and you talked about culture building, and that is a real risk too. That if it's not clearly defined, then that culture, the culture that you're trying to build with an RTO, could be negatively impacted because all of a sudden you've got a resentful employee or employee base that's coming in, and that can quickly become contagious. We all know that, right? That the negative sentiment, whether it's internal or external, is highly contagious, and in some ways even more contagious than the positive, right? So you've got to be really mindful of that. And then you have what you highlighted around, resenteeism that leads to that. But then another ism that comes to mind is absenteeism,
Mm,
right? So you have somebody who is perhaps that resentment is then leading to them being more disengaged, calling out sick more, making more reasons as to why I can't complete my day-to-day work, right? And then that starts to lead to other things behind the absenteeism around burnout, around now all of a sudden as a business, maybe you're taking a hit at health costs because you're now forcing employees to be present when they're not feeling well. And it just has a compounding snowballing effect. So it's something to be very mindful of. And obviously, all of those things stacked against you is going to lead to that higher turnover, like we
yeah.
talked about earlier.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. So one thing which also come to mind when we think about those drivers, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I work in the city of London, and for many years before COVID-19, I used to go to two restaurants. One is called Gacho Grill, which was near Smithfield Market. So we have the meat market in central London. So on one side, I had Gacho Grill, and on the other side, I have a Michelin star French restaurant. And
I know which one I'd choose.
yeah, and I used to go to both.
Yeah,
Not that often, this Michelin star, but once a year, you treat yourself, partly
right.
on Valentine's Day. Um, and talking to the first French restaurant, they actually talked to me about a big problem affecting us all, which is the fact that when we work from home, we don't go to those restaurants anymore. Gatchul actually just closed down near Smithfield Market.
Oh,
There are others in the city, but this one closed just recently. So, given the broader societal impact of RTO mandate, right, which I think becomes therefore a little bit important for building community, because actually working from home disrupt the public infrastructure, the local economies, and the restaurant we all love. A lot of them in London had to close. The cost of going out has increased drastically. So how should organizations approach RTO policies to support not only their workforce, but also the local communities?
yeah, that's an excellent way to look at it, right? Is a community involvement when you are considering RTO. How are you going to be partnering with those local businesses so that you're doing it in a collaborative way?
Yeah.
Something that we do here at our office is we have those local businesses that are coming in to help make lunches for us and to bring in catering. We're partnering with those, right? And we're making sure that we're being deliberate in shifting and bringing in somebody new every other day, and that it's now a partnership in that ecosystem to help complement what we're doing to help build some of those culture elements. So it's a win-win situation, while encouraging employees, let's say on the days that we're not bringing in lunch, to prioritize maybe local business around the office, right? A big thing here in the US is what we call food trucks. I don't know if they have those in the UK or not. I
Yes,
think
we
they do,
do,
right?
and we love them.
Um,
We call it street
it,
markets.
Street markets. See, there you go. The So we like to bring street markets to office as well. And so it gives some optionality for the employees, but then it's also a way for us to help invest back into the local economy. And then you also want to make sure that you're looking at, so we have a big priority here at Ivanti for volunteer time off. We call it VTO, right? Very common business acronym. But that VTO, how can that be married to a return to office policy as well? So does that allow us, which we've done here in our local office, a very consistently, which is, can we bring in a VTO opportunity while the employees are in office, and what can we do to help? One of the things we did recently is we helped pack up eye care kits. And we helped put those kits together. We sent them then to a local service company here that provides those eye care kits to certain areas of the world that need them, that are more impoverished. And so there's just ways that you can bring in that atmosphere and that localized effort so that you are providing an ultimate value beyond what you are providing as a business, to your local employees. You also need to make sure that you're coordinating. If you've got an opportunity to coordinate with your local government or your local transit authorities, right? We have here in front of our office what we call our front runner train. It's our high speed train that goes up and down the main front of the Salt Lake County here in Utah. And how do we make sure we're partnering with those local transit authorities so that we're making it less friction, or providing less friction for those employees to take public transit,
Mhm.
right? There's just ways that you can really focus on, how does my RTO not just benefit me as a business, but how's it benefiting my local economy? And what does that do? That helps your employees, right? It helps feel like I mentioned, one of my three pillars within my global services and support is purpose. And so I lead from autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you can get your employees to understand, hey, what's my purpose within the current work ecosystem that I'm in, but what is my purpose and how is that impacting also my local economy, right? And I and when you can marry that and tie that in so that employees really see the net benefit, then it helps them go back to what I would call that ROI, that personal ROI calculator.
Yeah.
Here's the cost to me, but let me look at it from a bigger aperture, so that I can agree to my concessions. Well, yeah, it's going to cost me an extra, $100 in fuel costs to get into the office this week, but I can see what I'm impacting at the local level. And so that's a concession I'm willing to make. So I think that's a really good analogy that you brought up around the two restaurants, right? And how they approach things differently. But how can we in our RTO posture ensure that those local restaurants stay open, right? They don't
Yeah.
have to close. We can
Yeah.
help bolster up their own personal economies and local economies while implementing policies that have a bigger impact than just the business to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did tell me they are very reliant on the business coming in or provide or asking for catering. And so it's interesting when you start going into those conversations because actually you actually understand how the ecosystem, right? The corporate
Mhm.
ecosystem actually enable the local economy, but the local businesses to survive as well. So again, my three statistic when I think about the current state of the return to the office dilemma. Employers cite improved productivity, stronger company culture, and greater managerial control as reason for RTO, but they are increasingly at odds with employees' experiences. Negative side effect, including presenteeism, as we mentioned now, which is coming back to the office just to be seen, and resenteeism, which is staying into a job that somebody doesn't really like just because of inflexibility, drive increasingly negative side effects to employees. And you mentioned absenteeism as well. So we just need to pay attention to those. And RTO mandates can disrupt public infrastructure and local economies. And I've learned it by talking to my local business economy environment, local businesses, as I go and have a bite to eat or actually have a drink. Now I want to go into the big word called generative AI, actually, Sterling, generative AI, shadow AI, and digital experiences. And I think when I look at some of the things we talked about on social media for the past 3 months, shadow AI is where probably more people engage with me on social channels actually over the past 3 months, following, the release of your report. So the adoption of Gen AI accelerated, as we know, with 42% of office workers and 74% of IT professionals using these tools to actually improve their productivity. But 46% of office workers use unauthorized AI called shadow AI. So, what are the main risks associated with shadow AI, actually, Sterling, and how can organizations address them? And do they
Yeah,
need to address them?
I think they absolutely need to address it. We had a conversation, speaking of hybrid work, when I was in office last Monday, was 2 days ago. Trying to remember what day of the week it is. On Monday, we had a very strict email come out from our security team.
Okay.
And it was, you have approved AI tools. Here they are. If you're not using these, stop. Right. And it led to a conversation at lunch around, well, does IT even know that I'm using anything outside of what are the approved tools?
Mhm.
How essentially giving myself a pat on the back, like, well, I can do it because nobody's going to, prevent me to do it. So
Yeah.
those initial approaches kind of lead to what I see as the crux of the problem is one understanding, well, what are the real risks of using the non-approved AI within the business? The first and foremost is data security and privacy breaches. That is a real risk that people have to understand, that could lead to something that could be the loss of your position right at the
Correct.
end of the
Yeah.
day. But behind that, what are we as a business doing on that list of approved AI tools to encourage the AI use cases and collectively prioritizing as a business those AI use cases that aren't currently in play? It's fast tracks some AI that can actually cover the gaps so that the employees are defaulting to the AI tool that they need to use. And in fact, they're not just incentivized to use it, they feel like it's just complementing what they do and that it's their go-to. So it's really building this environment that is highly complementary to what the employees want from their own personal AI and business AI perspective, so that then you don't have to worry about the shadow AI that employees would fall to, right? Other risks with shadow AI, you've got intellectual property loss. If somebody's putting in some intellectual property into a shadow AI system, that is a very real threat. You have some uncontrolled biased inputs that can come from third-party AI that you have better control of, that you're monitoring within your own respective AI systems to ensure that those biases aren't leading to something that is going to be a negative impact to the business. And the hallucinations that can come if unmonitored from Gen AI that can lead to a very negative impact for you personally or for the business or both. So that's where my teams, when I've implemented and we've implemented Gen AI here at Ivanti, I've also implemented Gen AI for my customer experience. So when a customer is going down and needing to question within our community and our forum portals, I have a generative output that goes to those customers. So I'm also controlling what my customers are creating for Gen AI, and I am monitoring very closely what's being generated. Is it providing the right data? Is it ignoring bias? Do I see a bias in my responses to that customer? And can I control it? So that's where businesses really need to adapt today to monitor the use cases, make sure they're addressing what the employees are demanding for so that they don't then lead to the crutch of, well, my company's not going to bring in AI, so I'm just going to do it anyway. Right. And what are those intake processes and what do they look like to help individuals submit and get something action on quickly so that they're not having to use the AI shadow to accomplish what they see as a net benefit to them.
And I think it's important to repeat that, if we are using shadow AI, it's very important to not add or produce or use client data in those. Your publicly
Yes.
available information, website link, annual reports, and questioning things which are already on the internet. Yes, anything which is internal customer data, no, 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 no. And it is super important as a result to actually follow the internal policy. Now, one thing which I think was interesting as well from the study is 32% of employees keep their AI usage secret, which means that there is something around trust, transparency, and potentially companies are still working out, right, which AI they should be using. And I think that is interesting because therefore, the question that comes to mind is how can leaders, foster a culture of transparency, of trust in the adoption, not being scared of using the new tools because they're there, but how can they bring the employee on that journey as well?
Yeah. It was brought up in the report, like you mentioned, around secret advantages, right? And that, 32% of employees feel or use AI in secret because they fear of things like job cuts. They want to make sure that they've got that advantage in their back pocket. So it's so important for leaders to encourage and promote that ability to have employee dialogue and openness around what are the real fears. If it is a retribution or job loss fear, that we're having that conversation openly with our employees so that they know that AI is not here to replace you, right? What is your policy on AI? How are you showing and proving to those employees that it's not here to replace you? And then you've got to focus on in that openness, and it's got to be both up and down in terms of communication. So it has to be bi-directional.
Mhm.
That the communication of the benefits of AI and the limitations of AI are in regular course, meaning that that bidirectional feedback is happening in a consistent feedback or in a consistent feedback loop, right? And that you as a leadership team and also as an individual contributor amongst your peers are showing how AI is enhancing your respective roles, and that that focus on enhancement rather than replacement
Yeah.
is so important, because then that dispels a lot of the fear. And I always tell people, you've got AI at your fingertips. You don't need to be scared of it. Use it. Get out there. You don't have to understand how it works even. You don't even need to know what an LLM is, right? What's a large language model? Like don't even worry about that. Just get out there and use it,
Yeah.
and you'll see how it's going to enhance your position. If you've got peers that are doing like for you and your role, meet with them, understand, hey, how are you using this? One thing so with our internal chat GPT that we leverage within our tools, we will formulate with my team, right, a response. And it can be a transcription of, maybe we have like a 2 hour troubleshooting session, or we have a 4 hour implementation session with services. And in the past, it used to take us 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, to retract what, or to redo review what was done in those previous 4 2 hour sessions, recap what was done, high level actions, who's the owner, what are the next steps. Very administrative, right, in
Yeah.
terms of the lift. And oftentimes, most of my team members especially looked at that as like, that's the work I don't like to do. Great. Guess what? Now, when you use AI, that work is done for you. You still are on the hook, though, to review what was the summation. What did AI give you in terms of that summation? And you need to convert it to your voice.
Yeah.
I don't want customers to get a sense of like, I'm getting an input from a robot, right? I need to have
100%.
them have that voice that is their own voice, felt and seen and read through from a customer's perspective. I know you've probably seen it. When you get an email, you can see this was AI generated,
I know. Yes.
right? So we
Yes.
want to really prevent that. But net, I think it's just promoting that psychological safety with individuals so that they feel like they can have open dialogue, and that second, they're really seeing the benefits from their peers, and that it's not this scary thing that's going to take their position away from them.
Yeah. And you know that human in the loop, we talk a lot about it, or humanizing AI is critical. But I think you actually eloquently explain why. Tone of voice have to actually bring that authenticity, that identity, which I'm really passionate about, around your communication. So that tone of voice needs to be yours. And your tone of voice is very different from mine. Mine is probably very, authoritative or much more conversational in my style as well. You know, the way I write, I like to be very I rather than you or they. I will have a much more personable approach to things. And so tone of voice and style become really critical. And only one, you, can actually apply that on top of the AI output. So that combination, human versus machine, becomes critical. And so
100%.
you're right. And so that means we need to look at governance, training, and policy measures within the organization. And for you, actually, Sterling, how do you actually start empowering employees to innovate with the tool, but also giving them the tools with the right training, the right policy, as you mentioned, IT saying, please, people don't do this, and the right governance.
Yeah, governance is a it can be a sticky topic, but I think it's one that individuals need to understand that it's there and what is the purpose of governance, right? So, um, establishing what are and why governance even exists is step one. So you have to form that. If it's a dedicated oversight committee, if it's a cross-functional team that sets those guardrails, they monitor AI use. They're not just monitoring AI use, but they're monitoring and reporting against the effectiveness of AI. There's governance there that helps benefit individuals, especially at the risk mitigation or risk management side. You also need to make sure that as you're building that governance that there is within every tool, continuous monitoring and auditing of the AI tool and the usage of that tool, so that you can understand what are the outcomes and is this really net giving us what we expect from an AI benefit and an AI experience. I think from beyond governance, that then leads you into a really good, training opportunity. So if you're going to be training and doing some initiatives behind training, how is that comprehensive employee education framed? How is it showing the effectiveness of Gen AI, including the data handling, the prompt handling, prompt engineering, right? All of those fun things that we like to use within AI. And then the AI, what I would call it, I know other people call it this as well, the AI literacy,
Yes.
so that you're improving your AI literacy at all levels. If that's my level, down to front level staff, customer facing versus internal customer facing only, understanding that you said it earlier, what are the risks of employee data versus customer data, and how do you need to be conscious of that data as you're injecting it into an AI tool, right? And then that helps develop your policy and your measures, and it encourages things in that policy around um, what I would call maybe responsible experimentation,
Yeah.
right? So you're allowing employees to have pilot opportunities with certain solutions, and that they're allowed to bring in a proof of concept, but it's done in a very formal way that backs up our AI policies that have been driven as an organization, and that we're encouraging that experimentation, and not we're not putting process ahead of progress there, but that it's then opening up the door for multiple inputs. I have the pleasure of being on our AI intake committee.
Okay.
And so I get to see all the submissions. And when we first started doing this, and it's a weekly committee, we would get maybe one a week, right? Maybe one every other week. Now it's reviewing like three or four every week, right? And it's new submissions, and it's really cool to see the excitement behind what people are actively getting experimental with, or looking beyond their position to say, how can this not just benefit me, but how can it benefit the Ivanti business? How can it benefit our customers? What can we take within that innovation and curiousness around AI and adopt it and bring it into our own respective products that we sell, right? In terms of software. So that's a lot of where a lot of our AI use cases for Avanti within our platform is being showcased. And I would encourage anybody out there to go out to our AI ITSM pages and see what we're doing, what we've got out there currently active available for customers, but also what we have roadmapped. But also encouraging folks, not just employees, but customers and partners alike, to also bring their curiosity to the table and tell us, what can we be doing as a business? And I know every business out there wants that voice from the customers that they're supporting to tell us as a business, what do we need to adopt for AI to make your life easier, right? To bring you more value at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm doing as well my own study around AI and generative AI, partly for finance and the process and the operation of insurance. But I'm really excited. I will be attending a Claude Anthropic Ali K. Miller training session in August to actually get me really deep into agentic AI. So I'm really excited about that. But let's
Cool.
remember that generative AI, in the workplace need to be used very carefully, right? The main reason is
Yeah.
because of shadow AI. And often that happens because of lack of policy, as you said, within the organization, fear of job cut, and a desire for us to create advantage. All of us want that advantage, and I want my advantage as well by doing 2 days of training during later this August month. Now, I think it's also very important to remember that Generative AI is used within your environment in Ivanti. I remember reading it is used for preventative IT maintenance, automating incident response, and identifying root cause, right? Performing root cause analysis. So you guys are already doing a lot of Gen AI for a number of processes to help clients and also to help the business do better. But one thing which was also a statement we talked about in the past is employees are three times more likely than leaders to believe that AI is going to replace 30% of their work in the years to come. So we just need to manage that as well. Which brings me to my last question to you, Sterling. Looking ahead, right? Looking at where we are going and the type of action organizations need to take when they're actually going to create the right future ready workplace, right? We are going through a workplace transformation. What should they do to attract, retain, and empower their talent while leveraging the full potential of AI, but also other tools, right? Like the tools you are offering to the market to make us safer, to actually make sure that we treat our employee right through the digital employee experience, as an example, or making tech at work the right one for the people we're working with and for our clients.
What an awesome question. I personally love the future proofing and the trying to look around corners, right? Trying to see what is going to be coming for the future of workplaces and our own careers and our own path and how is that workplace augmentation going to impact us. So I love the question and how is that going to in the future, even today, right? It feels
We're
like we're
already
in the
there.
future constantly, right? It's always being developed by the hour, by the minute sometimes. But the thing that we talked about at the very beginning around workplace flexibility, I see that as point one, that we need to commit to flexible work models to offer that hybrid, the in office, the remote, the asynchronous options wherever possible, so that you're tailoring that flexibility to your business and your employee needs, right? Beyond behind the commitment, then you've got your framework of flexible work built out. You then cultivate the culture internally, right? So that there is a culture of continuous learning,
Yeah.
and how are you backing that learning with objectives even? When I first took over as the SVP, my one of my first goals was personal development. I want you to go out and get certified in something, right? Get out there and get a third party certification this year. Get it submitted. We'll get it approved. We want to see it be highly complementary to your own career progression, but just get out there and learn something, right? Don't feel like you're stuck in your learning paths now. Experiment, right? So that culture of continuous learning, and how are you as a leadership encouraging not just that moment in time learning, but that lifelong learning process through peers, through mentorship, through the self-paced learning mechanisms that you're providing. There's a lot of things you can do
Yeah.
to build that learning culture that then transcends beyond the business. Then you have to lead from example, like we talked about. I think that is going to be part of this augmentation of workplace dynamics, that we are empowering as a leadership team, that safety, that transparency, that trust, so employees feel empowered and safe to innovate and experiment and to share new ideas, right? That's
Mhm.
so important. And then behind that experimentation, because you don't want it to become a lawless land, you have to build out your governance. You have to make sure that what you're implementing for tech governance is responsible. It's mindful of what's being developed in the rears and in front of us, and that it's enforceable and that it's very clear in terms of the ethical policies and what you're doing to help accelerate adoption of new AI tools and that piece. So I think if you lead from that position of I want to be empowering my teams to be curious and to be adopting that flexibility on their own, both in work-life balance, but also tooling, AI, everything else that's helping them become better at the end of the day, then you're going to see this augmented workplace continue to grow, and you're going to be better capable to adapt for what's going to be behind the next big break, right? And then finally, just when you've adopted that innovation mindset, that you're measuring it, you're iterating on it, right? You're adapting what's really making and moving and shifting in the ways that you want to be moving as a business. But I look at that at every single layer. So what are you measuring at the top line business that's complementary from the innovation that's coming in the future of work? But that then leveling down, what are you within your respective organizations? Like myself, if I'm leading an organization, what is that measurement of the late breaking tools and the latest innovations that I'm agreeing to adopt? What's working well and what's not working? Am I sharing that with my peers and allowing them to lead their organizations and to share those wins so that we're all adapting and all innovating at the same pace across the board? And then as middle management and as individual contributors, making sure that that continues to be iterative at each layer, and that the adaptation, that if somebody's finding something at an individual contributor level that they've adapted and that it's really proving ROI and that it's really making a movement in a positive direction, then that bi-directional feedback and accountability and what we're measuring from the bottom up is also being seen, and that we're able to quickly adopt and pivot to what somebody has found in their unique corner of the business, just so that we're not stifling the ability for the individual to become that high level contributor, and to lead us, even right from flipping the pyramid. They're the ones leading us through that next innovation cycle that we want to grow to as a business. So really be future ready and look for the signals within the business at all levels to make sure that when we find a signal of something's working well, and this is something we want to invest in, this is something that we feel is going to drive value, whether that's internal, external, or in best case, both, right? It's going to innovate for the best of our customers, it's going to innovate for the best of our partners, and it's going to innovate for the best of the employee base, right? I think that's where we're going to see that future of work continue to be agile and transparent with us so that we can move forward and become the best that we possibly can in our respective roles.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sterling. Being future ready is actually critical. And then you also mentioned purposeful. And then thinking about outside in, right? Listening to an employee and what they are bringing in. Empowerment through sanctioned AI tools, I learned from you. Training, flexible work is linked to higher satisfaction and retention. There's no doubt about it. And company that balances optimization and empowerment see higher employee satisfaction, reduce turnover, and improve business performance. And the key here is the strategies which we need to investigate and implement is about investing in training, fostering trust, transparency, and autonomy, involving employees in tech decision and focus on outcome over presents. So thank you so much, Sterling, for joining me on Starting for Growth. So if somebody wants to reach out and say, hi, Sterling, what should they do?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty rare breed. There's not many people out there named Sterling Parker. So you'll see me. I'm the bald guy. I think there's a few other folks out there, but yeah, Sterling Parker, SVP over our global solutions and services for Ivanti. Please don't hesitate to reach out to continue the discussion. And Sabine, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast. And I very much value the time that we spend together. And as always, enchanté. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. So thank you.
My pleasure. Enchanté aussi. Et à bientôt, Sterling. Bye bye.
À bientôt. Au revoir. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.